Her one final blind date, the lonely billionaire CEO thought it was a joke, until she walked in and Marcus Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the Manhattan skyline blur into darkness. At 42, he had everything money could buy: 3 homes, a yacht he'd used twice, and a net worth that placed him on Forbes' coveted list. Yet tonight, like every night for the past 5 years, he'd returned to an empty apartment where silence echoed louder than any sound. His assistant had just sent him another blind date setup, the 5th this month. He almost deleted the message, his finger hovering over his phone, when something made him stop. Maybe it was the exhaustion of pretending he didn't care. Maybe it was the memory of his late mother's voice, begging him not to let wealth become his prison. Either way, he typed a single word: fine. The restaurant his assistant chose was modest by his standards, a small Italian place in Brooklyn where the tablecloths were checkered and the candles were real wax, not LED. Marcus arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from his corporate life, and chose a corner table where he could observe without being observed. He'd been on enough of these setups to know the pattern. Women who saw dollar signs before they saw him, conversations that felt like job interviews, smiles that never quite reached the eyes. He checked his watch. 7:02 p.m., she was late. At 7:15, he was halfway through his second glass of water, convincing himself this was a sign to leave when the door opened. The woman who walked in made him forget every practiced greeting he'd prepared. She wasn't what he expected. No designer dress, no calculated glamour. She wore jeans and a simple cream sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she was carrying a paper bag that looked suspiciously like groceries. But it was her face that stopped him, flushed, apologetic, and radiating a warmth that seemed to fill the entire room. "Marcus?" she asked, approaching his table with hurried steps. "I'm so sorry I'm late. There was this situation at the subway station, and I couldn't just walk away, and—" She paused, catching her breath. "I'm Emma, and I promise I'm not usually a disaster." Something about her honesty made him smile, genuinely smile, for the first time in months. "It's okay. Please sit down." As Emma settled into her chair, still clutching her paper bag, Marcus noticed her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Honestly, I almost didn't come. Blind dates terrify me. But my sister set this up, and she's been through a really tough time lately, and making her happy seemed more important than my anxiety." She finally set down her bag. "Also, I should explain this. There was a homeless woman at the station, and she had her kid with her, and they looked so hungry. So I grabbed some groceries from the corner store. Made me late, but some things matter more than punctuality, right?" Marcus stared at her, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. In his world, people were late because of traffic or vanity or power plays. This woman was late because she stopped to help a stranger. "That was kind of you," he said quietly. Emma shrugged. "It was human of me. There's a difference." Her eyes met his then. Really met his, and he felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. "So, Marcus, what do you do?" He hesitated. This was usually the moment that changed everything, when his wealth became the elephant in the room. "I'm in business. Tech, mostly." It wasn't a lie, just an omission. They talked for hours. Emma was a social worker who spent her days helping families navigate housing crises. She spoke about her work with a passion that made his corporate achievements feel hollow. She told him about her sister's recovery from cancer, about her tiny apartment that she loved because she could see a sliver of the East River if she leaned out the window. Just right. About her dream of opening a community center where people could find real help, not just bureaucracy. "What about you?" she asked over dessert they'd decided to split. What makes Marcus happy? Not successful? Happy? No one had ever asked him that. He thought about his answer carefully. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "I think I forgot somewhere along the way." Emma's expression softened. "Then maybe it's time to remember." They left the restaurant at midnight, neither wanting the evening to end. As they walked through the Brooklyn streets, Emma suddenly stopped in front of a 24-hour diner where an elderly man sat, alone in the window, crying quietly over a cup of coffee. "Wait here," she said, and before Marcus could respond, she'd walked inside. Through the glass, he watched her sit across from the stranger. Take his hands and simply listen. The man's face transformed as he spoke, his tears shifting from sorrow to what looked like relief. Emma wrote something on a napkin, squeezed his hands once more, and returned outside. "What was that?" Marcus asked, stunned. "He just lost his wife of 50 years. He said he came here because it was her favorite place, but being alone made it worse. I gave him the number for a grief support group I know." She looked up at Marcus. "Sorry, I know it's strange. I just can't walk past suffering. It feels wrong, you know?" He did know. Or rather, he'd known once, before success had insulated him from other people's pain. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus and Emma saw each other whenever they could. She introduced him to a world he'd forgotten existed, volunteering at soup, kitchens, visiting her clients, spending Saturday mornings at a community garden where neighbors grew vegetables together. He found himself laughing more, sleeping better, feeling more alive than he had in years. But he still hadn't told her the truth about who he was. The revelation came by accident. Emma's sister needed emergency surgery, something her insurance wouldn't fully cover. Emma mentioned it casually, her voice tight with worry she was trying to hide. Marcus made a single phone call that night, and by morning, the hospital bill was paid in full, anonymously, he'd requested. But Emma was too smart, too connected to her community. She discovered the truth within days. When she showed up at his office, his real office, the one on the 52nd floor with his name on the building, her face was a mixture of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, standing in the middle of his vast corner office that suddenly felt absurd and excessive. "Because I wanted you to see me," Marcus said. "Not my bank account. Not what I could do for you, just me. But who you are includes what you do with your wealth," Emma countered. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Marcus, do you know how many families I work with who are drowning while people with resources look away? You have the power to change lives, not just pay a bill here and there." Her words cut deep because they were true. "You're right," he said simply. "I've been so focused on building wealth that I forgot what it was for." Emma stepped closer. "Money isn't evil, Marcus. Hoarding it is. Hiding behind it is. But using it to lift others up? That's everything." That conversation changed him. Within a month, Marcus had established a foundation with Emma as director. They opened the community center she'd dreamed of, funded housing initiatives, created job training programs. He still ran his company, but now his success had purpose beyond the bottom line. 6 months after that first blind date, Marcus proposed to Emma at the same modest Italian restaurant. He didn't have a ring. Instead, he had blueprints for a new wing at the community center that would include medical services for uninsured families. "Will you marry me?" he asked. "Not because of what I have, but because of who you've helped me become?" Emma's tears came freely this time, joyful and abundant. "Yes, because you're remembering how to be happy, and you're helping others do the same." At their wedding, Marcus looked around at the crowded room, not filled with business, associates and society figures, but with social workers, families Emma had helped, volunteers from the community center, and people whose lives they'd touched together. His mother would have loved this, he thought. She would have loved Emma. "What are you thinking?" Emma whispered, taking his hand. "That I spent years believing I was alone," he said. "But I was just isolated by my own fear of being vulnerable." Emma squeezed his hand. "You're not alone anymore, and neither are the hundreds of people we're going to help together." As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Marcus realized that his blind date had given him something infinitely more valuable than companionship. Emma had restored his sight, helped him see beyond himself, beyond his wealth, beyond the walls he'd built. She'd shown him that true richness came not from accumulation, but from connection, compassion, and the courage to let humanity guide every choice. The lonely billionaire CEO had walked into that restaurant expecting nothing. He'd walked out having found everything: purpose, love, and the profound understanding that wealth meant nothing without someone to share it with and others to lift up with it. In the end, it wasn't money that saved Marcus Chen. It was one woman's radical kindness that reminded him he'd always had the power to save himself by saving others first.